when you learn how to change your mindset, you learn how to change your reality, because your brain is basically a computer that's been cataloging everything that's gone into it, however long you've been alive. And that creates your mindset. If you're not getting the results you want, like you're not getting the cash and prizes you want, it's because you're taking the wrong actions. The wrong actions you're taking are coming from a mindset that's not in alignment with the target. The mindset that's not in alignment with the target is coming from a frame that's not in alignment with the target. So while your brain will tell you, if I'm not getting the results, it's a strategy problem, I need to figure out what to do, it's actually not a strategy problem, it's a frame problem. When you start to uncover and go bigger, towards bigger and bigger things, oh my God, I'm gonna go hit this big target I never did before, and then all of a sudden, a second later, you're like, oh my God, I failed 4 years ago. As you're going bigger and bigger, any of the past references in your mindset that contradict it will come up. And this is where I used to get stuck, and some people get stuck, is they...
I'm so excited to have you. Thanks for joining me today, Jason.
I'm excited to talk today too.
Yeah, it's always fun when you have a chance to talk about mindset. Yeah. And I want to dip right in because you have 4 boys. You've got a family. It says in your bio, I'm husband of 4 boys.
Yep.
How do you use this platform, your mindset, your alignment training with your family? I'm just curious of what's the process that you go to take like stuff that works with the top performers in the world to the family, because it's something I personally love to learn about and I hope to utilize in my own life on a regular basis.
Well, the first thing I learned when I became a coach back in 2013, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be awesome. I can parent, I can be awesome. And I realized then they informed me that coaching only works with permission. Right? So if someone doesn't want coaching, they don't, your advice doesn't matter. Right? So how do I utilize my experience for my family? A big part of it is modeling, trying to model the right behavior, and also language. Language is probably the #1 area where I make an impact on the family, because like I grew up with a family who was like, we always couldn't afford it and things were tough, right? So I grew up thinking I couldn't afford it. And even when, like 10 years ago, there was a moment we were on food assistance from the state when I was a beginning entrepreneur. Even during that time, I never told the boys we can't afford it, right? Because I didn't want to create a limited mindset in them. So I'm very cautious about the language I use and how I respond to them, so it keeps them open, because I want to make sure they stay open to what's possible, to their full potential, to everything.
It's really that scarcity mindset when you come from a world of not having a lot. And I came from a very blessed family. I have a mom and a dad who are amazing. Yeah. I had enough. We went to Catholic school. There was a lot of things that they sacrificed for us. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I heard we can't afford it all too often. And it did limit my beliefs growing up. I had to break those down and really rebuild them to that mindset of abundance. And I've done the same thing with my boys. I completely agree. Yeah. Talk to me about alignment, Jason. It's kind of like the secret recipe to so much of what you talk about in your videos and your podcast. That you've coached some of the biggest producers and some amazing humans out there to really, really successful careers, mm-hmm. lives in general. Talk to our audience about alignment.
So Jason Drees coaching was just Jason Drees from 2013 to 2019. And I worked at Tony Robbins for about 3.5 years and had a couple other jobs, but I was never making the money that I wanted, despite working hard and doing everything I can and trying to post social media and all that stuff. And I get to the point in 2019 where it just wasn't cutting it, right? The income was we were struggling. I only had 3 personal clients. We're struggling to pay the bills. And we'd been struggling financially for 3 to 4 years, maybe 5 years now. And we've had moments where we worked, but it was been stressful. So I got to the point where I finally got to where I gave up, right? I was like, you gave it 6 years to try to become a coach. You can't support your family. This is ridiculous. You got to go do something. So go get it done. So I literally said, I quit. I'm done. And as any entrepreneur knows, I cried and I was heartbroken that the dream of coaching was done. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to go get another tech sales job and take care of my family. And then over the next 5 weeks, I had like 4 or 5 contract referrals come in. And I hadn't had 4 or 5 referrals in like 3 years, which is ridiculous because I'm an amazing coach. I was one of the top coaches on the entire Robbins team. Why was I getting referrals? Well, that's actually a different story of why I wasn't getting referrals. But what I learned is hard work doesn't create success. Because I worked hard, nothing happened. I quit and everything starts coming in. So that was actually the beginning of understanding what alignment is, because prior to that, I thought you grind your way to success. This told me that their success comes from a way that is not hard work. And for the past 5 years, I've been kind of studying that process. So I basically went from being a results-based coach, right? Where a results-based coach would say, hey, Scott, what do you want to do? Let's say you're a realtor and you need more listings, right? What are you going to do? Why don't you go knock on doors? Well, I'm afraid of rejection. And as a results coach, I would say, what kind of man are you going to be, right? So results coaching would force misaligned action with negative leverage, right? And that's okay. And then what actually happened in 2020 is I discovered there's a level above mindset called frame. And by understanding that mindset, I started coaching at the frame level versus the mindset level, and it started to shift anything. And that's where I learned that success doesn't come from hard work. Success comes from alignment with success. Hard work just gives you more chances to get into alignment, but most of us don't really know if we're aligned with our targets or not. And that's where our magic is getting you aligned with your target, because let's say you are 70% certain you can hit your target, which is very normal for a lot of entrepreneurs, maybe 70 to 90%. That's the same thing as you, Scott, jumping in your car saying, I'm going to drive to Disneyland in Anaheim, California, and the address of my car's GPS is 70% right. Right? So it's like this incomplete map, right? It takes longer to ask for directions. And so what I figured out how to do is how to align people with targets they don't know how to hit so they can hit them much faster. And that's what alignment is.
So walk me through what you were doing wrong with referrals. You mentioned that, and you said that's a whole different story. So how did the alignment and the referral situation both come into play?
I discovered, and I said, well, how come I'm getting referrals now and I wasn't getting any before? And that's when I discovered I had a moment. I have these moments of clarity, and I don't know how my brain works this way. I'm literally channeling this stuff. But I had this moment where I was like, I needed to be open to help. And it was basically the question of, am I open to help? And I was resistant to help before and I wasn't resistant to help. I just believed if I wanted to be successful, I had to do it myself, because that's the belief I created in high school. Like I've had a job ever since I'm 15. Like if you want to be successful, you got to do it yourself. And what I realized in that moment is that was basically the inverse of that is true. Is I'm resisting help from other people, so life wasn't helping me. And I went through this process of like, what if the #1 boat trailer manufacturer in the world started from living next door to a guy who builds boats and he was just a great welder, right? And I'm like, is it okay to have a business that starts from proximity of someone else? Is it okay? And I started to think about it. It's like, yes, every business starts on opportunity, right? So that's when I realized I need to start getting more help. And I opened myself up. I changed those beliefs to get myself more aligned with help. And then 4 months later, Brandon Turner comes in and things just skyrocketed.
So it's almost like the way that we teach our children, right? At the end of the day, any successful entrepreneur wants their children to have opportunities. The founding fathers said, we are soldiers, so our children can be teachers, so their children can be artists, and then every generation after artist. They didn't say this, but it usually means that they become soldiers again. Mm-hmm. And but the reality is we want to kind of level them up. We want them to experience similar things, mm-hmm. similar ethics, similar mindset, similar values, but we don't want them to have to start from the bottom. And I think growing up the way probably you and I both did, we felt like in the beginning, it was like, if you don't do it the way I did it, then you're never going to really experience it. And it's that scarcity mindset again, where you're not opening yourself up to help.
That's something I catch a lot when I'm coaching parents, is that especially men, they'll try to create the scenario as that created the lesson for them as a child, and it never works. And what they don't realize is that when you got the lesson in childhood, you solved that problem. So they don't have it. So trying to duplicate that to create that experience just doesn't work.
No, it's interesting. I told my mom one time, I said, Mom, it's a lot easier to just say we can't afford it than it is for me to say no, because I can afford it and my kids know I can afford it. And because I'm open and we talk about things, and, the older they got, they'd be like, well, Dad, you can afford it. I would never say I can't afford it. I was just saying no. And we were having this conversation one day. I was like, you know what? I almost envy the ability to just say I can't, because it seems like a better cop-out. But I have to actually explain why I'm not doing it. But what I'm doing is I'm doing exactly what we're talking about. I'm teaching them the principles and the values as to why I'm making decisions and modeling it. But it's always a little bit more complex.
Agree.
Yeah.
Perfect.
That's awesome. So with alignment, you found a whole new success ratio, and things just started to open up for you. Was there a turning point? You mentioned Brian Turner and some people that really turned it around for you. Was it one person that really turned it around for you, or was it like a mindset that just flipped and everything was that clarity you were talking about?
Well, it was primarily one person, in proximity to one person. This is Brandon Turner in the real estate investor.
Okay.
So that's one, like, because I had been coaching him for a few years and I didn't know who he was because I wasn't a real estate investor. And then I started to realize that, and the closer I got to him, and there were times where I had to work on my mindset because I wasn't high enough to work with him. And it actually happened multiple times. So I had to work on my mindset. And then when that happened, we started doing Instagram lives together. All this happened. All of a sudden next year, he got me on the Bigger Pockets podcast, and getting on the Bigger Pockets of podcast, like my business 10x that year, then a quarter after that.
Wow.
And the next year it tripled. So and then Bigger Pockets led me to they published my book too as well. So all of that came from my relationship and proximity to Brandon.
Yeah. You know what's funny? I think all of us go through this, and I think everyone can relate to that, is that you go through moments where you can call it imposter syndrome. You can call it just not knowing if you're in the right room. Mm-hmm. I can remember when I started my financial services business, and we wanted to grow it in a way that other people weren't growing. And I ended up in a room with like 9 other entrepreneurs who were doing the same thing. And I always had a tendency early on in my life to speak up and to try to assert myself really, really quickly as a defense mechanism, and the older I got, the smarter I got. And I realized, hey, sit back, relax, listen, learn, take in the room. Yeah. And that alone changed so much of my own internal feelings and thoughts about what I could accomplish, because by doing that, I was building confidence. I would listen to someone say something that I thought was a great idea and find myself agreeing and adding value. I would find myself listening to someone who said something ridiculous, and I would literally be like, what is this guy talking? He's lost his mind. Uh-huh. And he's 3 times the size of my business right now. Yeah. And so it builds that confidence, and your whole mindset starts to shift just by being quiet, just by listening more than you're speaking.
Yeah. Yeah. Stillness is powerful. That's where you find yourself, and that's where all the magic is. 100%.
Yeah. So what are you, how are you connecting with more people today? So you 10X your business twice, right? I think I read that you saw a 10X and another 10X.
No, a 10X,
so
you've 10X then a 3X. I wish a 10X.
A 3X. Okay. A 10X and a 3X. Yeah. All right. Well, the 3 times he's 3 times the 10X, which is great. Yeah. So what are you finding now as you're getting to the next levels, as you've really found that rhythm? Where are you finding the most success, and where are you putting most of your time, energy, and efforts?
Well, right now it's a combination, right? Like we're having a hard time right now because the majority of our clients are real estate investors, and real estate's been hit really hard recently. So we're kind of in a transitional phase this year. But most of the people we're working with are either finding me from the podcast or from Facebook ads or for social media. And I think my warm list is like a big part of it. I've had an email list building for quite a while. So working the warm list and also trying to figure out, and I was coaching with Bo for a while. So I'm trying to figure out how to talk to my audience, without just spitting out coaching language all the time. So that's kind of my major growth area right now. Is I know there's a way for me to talk to that audience and love it because I have so much good stuff in here, but it comes out in a way that's salesy or something. So I'm working through that right now. That's kind of a growth area.
It's a growth spot, because when you're looking at yourself and you're putting out content, and I'm going to use, for those listening, I'm going to use air quotes of content, because I never believe when I'm putting something out that it's for content purposes. I believe that I'm putting it out to help someone. And I think, Jason, you're the very same way. So you find that it's impacting people in a much greater way than what you anticipate, but then you actually are mindset wise, you're like, why is anyone listening to me talk for 35 straight minutes? Like, can this really be this valuable? And we were talking about this briefly before we started the show. But I guess the point I'm getting at is it something that you find yourself kind of building yourself up and then just executing? Or do you have to continuously tell yourself while you're doing it that it's worth it, that it's valuable, that you're doing the right thing as you're executing?
Well, I don't think it's either of those, right? I'm doing everything I can to grow it, and I think most of my content comes from flow, but when it comes to like social media, the biggest problem with the content that comes out of me is it's such a high level that most people can't understand it. So it's like I got to explain it to you for 10 minutes, and after 10 minutes, then I tell you, and you're like, holy shit, that's amazing. But it takes 10 so it's like dumbing it down to where everybody can hear in sound bites in like 5 seconds, because my flow kicks in like 2 minutes, right? So it's been an interesting way of trying to talk about what I'm passionate about and what really helps, and playing that game of social media algorithms or whatever you want to call it, you know?
Yeah. Are you good enough? Yeah. Do they think you're good enough? Are you saying the words that they need you to say so that it could execute across multiple platforms?
Yeah. Yeah. The one problem that we have being maybe my limiting story, but as a performance coach, it's very hard to say what we do, right? As a friend, my friend runs a coaching business, but his is like save your marriage coaching, right? So pain point, very clear, right? Performance coaching, what do? We bring out your best. We expand your potential. We remove roadblocks. We help you do impossible things. But they're all non-specific, right? So and my background was always sales, not marketing. So the marketing part has always been kind of foreign to me.
Yeah, it's attracting people to that messaging, attracting people to what you do. And you're right. Save your marriage is really simple. It's very simple. Yep. In that you're going to have a result and the ROI is evident, even though all the work really depends upon what they do to execute. Not much different than a performance coach. Yeah. You're going to provide them with the data. They have to actually execute upon that.
True. Yeah.
So you have a 5-step process to help people unleash like what's inside of them. Can you walk through a little bit of this process that I know you put out in your book, you put out into your podcast, you've talked about this on a regular basis, but I think it's really valuable for listeners to kind of think through and get a taste of what you can offer them if they were reaching out to you to help you, to help themselves in that next chapter, accomplishing the impossible, if you will.
Yeah, let me give a little foundation before I answer that question. If I say simply, right? Like, so for example, if you're not getting the results you want, like you're not getting the cash and prizes you want, it's because you're taking the wrong actions, right? The wrong actions you're taking are coming from a mindset that's not in alignment with the target. The mindset that's not in alignment with the target is coming from a frame that's not in alignment with the target. Does that make sense? So while your brain will tell you, if I'm not getting the results, it's a strategy problem, I need to figure out what to do, it's actually not a strategy problem, it's a frame problem. So, and this is basically what alignment is. So for example, we take action, right? At the end of the day, you're after an action, right? Where does the action come from? The action comes from your mind. The action you take comes from your mindset. Pretty simple, right?
Yep.
Now, results-based coaching, just coaches at this level right here, mindset and action, because they haven't got to the higher level yet, okay? But you also probably have heard people say that mindset's hard to change, right? How do you change? You got repetitions, incantations, affirmations, stuff like that. But it's when you try to change mindset from the level of mindset, it's very difficult. But when you understand where mindset comes from, it's very easy to change mindset, because where mindset actually comes from is your frame. Frame is the frequency of you. The frequency of you creates the frequency of your thoughts. The frequency of your thoughts creates the actions you take. So if you are 100% certain you can hit the target, you are in alignment. The frame will create an aligned mindset that'll create an aligned action, and you'll hit the target. Boom. If the mindset is 98% certain, it's not alignment. So the concept that we're doing is we're teaching people how to hit their goals by aligning their frequency with that to make it happen faster. So, and it leads to, instead of like grinding, you get like naturally inspired action and flow. And that's right there. And we're the only people on the planet that are coaching at the frame level right now. Okay.
But I know you're going to go deeper. I just wanted to make a comment. One of the things that my boys both play soccer all the time. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that sometimes happens when you're an athlete is you get impatient. The game is maybe it's not going the way that you want. You're not touching the ball in a soccer game as much as you'd like. And I find myself, as a father, as a coach at times saying, let the game come to you. Yeah. Let just continue to do what you do, but let the game come to you, because when we try to force ourselves upon the game, it's the opposite effect that we get. And I feel like that's kind of the framework of what you're talking about here.
Well, because everything we want involves other people. Now, maybe you want a six-pack abs is all you, but most of the stuff we're working towards involves other people. So and this is where I used to get stuck, and some people get stuck, is they'd plant their flag trying to tell life how it is. But if you align with life, that's where the magic really starts to come out.
Yeah, it's funny because with alignment, that when I talk about my life model, what I'm talking about is my alignment model. Life to me was, I just established the 4 blocks, the 4 compartments, the 4 quadrants of life that were most important to me. And I'm always in balance, because anytime you're working towards a goal, you find yourself putting more energy into one area than another, or maybe I'm saying, hey, I've been on the road, I have so much work I'm doing. But if family and these things are the most important things, I'm not prioritizing those things. Yeah. But by putting them down on paper, by identifying them, I'm always able to see where I need to recalibrate. Yeah. And it's how I've always stayed focused and been able to, even though we find ourselves misaligned, it kind of helps to make the target. What is the target? Why am I working towards the target? That's a interesting dynamic.
Yeah. Agree. 100%.
So you were setting up the framework. You were giving us some description.
Okay, so this is alignment. Alignment is the first step of the framework. And it's actually really simple. Now, it's hard to comprehend because mindset's hard to comprehend. It's easy to comprehend mindset when you're looking at somebody else, because you can see the difference in your mindset. But when your own mindset, it's your reality. So you're not thinking that you're not looking at your problem going, I'm thinking in a limited way, because it's just your reality, right? So the framework itself is 5 steps. The first one is, what is alignment? And once you understand that process of alignment, we apply it in 4 different places. We apply it with success, which is basically business, goal setting, financial mindset, leadership, all that stuff. So we'll align it with success. We align you with yourself. We align you with other people, and we align you with life. And those are the 4 areas where people get kicked out of alignment as they're growing and expanding, trying new things. And the great thing is that once you understand how to get into alignment, it works in every single subject the exact same way. So the people that actually come in to work with us, and they may be coming, Jason, I'm hiring you as a coach because I want to grow my business, or I want to make more money. And what actually happens after 6 months, a year, we literally raise every area of their life, because as human beings, we end up getting so stuck on the subject. So we're thinking about the subject of what we want, right? We don't think about which I call subject frame. We don't really think about our process frames, which is how your brain thinks, what your brain thinks is possible, how life works for you. And all of those are beliefs that you can change. So basically, over time, we start to shift all of those your beliefs and your frames in alignment, so you automatically operate how you want to.
That's awesome. And so true. I mean, so much of this is frequency. We are the energy that we put out into the world. And if we're putting the wrong energy out there, then we're actually getting the wrong results so often, right?
Yeah. Well, like you can be in a sad frequency and have sad thoughts and sad actions. You're going to be in a happy frequency, have happy thoughts and happy actions. But you can also be in a 85% certain you can do it entrepreneur mindset versus 100%. So it's a lot of times there's this last part, we use positive thinking instead of getting into alignment. And when you make that shift, like when I started coaching this way, my clients' results just went through the roof, just boom, because it's how life works.
It's powerful though, because no matter how good you are at doing things, you have to constantly adjust and align, because There are times where things are going to happen in your life where you get into a funk or something doesn't feel good, or, you know, we have moments where we have to remind ourselves. It's funny. It's almost like I had, when I first started the business in 16, I've never been good at mentally. I've always convinced myself I'm completely fine while my body internally is like completely blowing up from the inside out, you know? And what I mean by that is there'll be like some autoimmune situation, or I'll get eczema all over my body, or some like my body is literally screaming at me.
Yeah.
And as I got older and I started to see these correlations, I started to recognize them as signs. Hey, you're not living in that alignment. You're not living in that space where you're gonna feel you're telling yourself it's fine, but it's not fine. Yeah. So why is it not fine? What are we doing to get to the bottom of it? And it's so valuable in everything that we do. How are you? What makes you so successful in the real estate space? What is the like you said that it's the majority of your relationships. What do you find so appealing or just so fun about that space? I love real estate, but I'm just interested in general.
Well, it was the proximity to Brandon that pulled me into real estate, really. And so, but what I love about real estate investors is that they're open to growing. Most of them are open to coaching, and they're open to investing in themselves. So from a coaching point of view, they're the best clients because they want coaching. They'll sign up, they'll pay. But at the same time, they're the funnest clients to coach because they're doing cool shit. They're going big, right? Like what we really do is like people who come to work with us are trying to do some impossible things they've never done before. And that's where, you know, and I 11 to help Brandon 11x his income, right? So it's like we raise people's incomes by raising their frequency. But that audience, most of my clients are there. But I love the demographic of real estate investors, you know?
Yeah, they have there's less propensity for failure, meaning that they're not afraid to fail. And if they do, they learn from it, they build on it. And anyone that's investing in themselves or spending money to invest in themselves are really in that space, huh?
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
That's all. That's great. When you so Austin, Texas, have you been out in Austin for a long time, or is that a new market for you? I feel like everyone in Austin is like new to Austin.
They are, yeah. We're part of the California migration 3.5 years ago. We bailed during COVID, but yeah, Austin's a fun town. Doesn't feel as Texas-y as being 20 minutes away, but it's still fun. But it's a cool town. There's water nearby. The city's fun. The food is great. The music's awesome. It's hot as hell, but it's a lot of fun.
You haven't bumped into Matthew McConaughey after like an Austin FC game, buck naked with a drum outside, like hanging out at all, or what? Is that just what we dream about when we go to Austin?
Maybe, I don't know. I'm 50. I don't go out that often late at night, so don't do many naked drum circles anymore. So.
Yeah, I know. That's funny. I think. Have you been to Austin FC games? Have you gone to any of the soccer games while you've been out there?
No, I haven't. No.
It looks like an experience. When my brother was planning his bachelor party, we were looking at cities that we hadn't been to and that had soccer teams. And Austin was just one of those cities where we're like, oh, that'd be a great one to go to just because it looks like an entire movement in these areas. Yeah. And Austin seems like a kind of youthful city that things can just move like that.
Yeah, it's definitely, there's definitely some form of like nucleus forming here in Austin right now because it's just pulling people in like crazy. And most of those people are high frequency, doing cool things, lots of stuff. So it's really turning into a really cool place to be.
Do you find, so with this high frequency, do you find that there are particular pockets in the country that just have a level of this frequency that you tend, as you coach people, that you're finding? Like, I'd imagine there's a high frequency in Florida right now with all the people that are moving to create new opportunities, much like people went to Texas. But are there other areas that you're seeing this movement?
Well, you know, I think the major tech metros and stuff like that, I'm seeing it, but I'm not seeing anything specific. You know, I'm seeing more of it here. But I'm not really in those other cities, so I don't really notice it as well as here, you know.
Got it. Yeah. So when you're focusing so much on real estate, if you were going to expand, is there if we have people listening today in other industries, are there other industries that you tend to feel you can really make an impact in?
Well, we impact everybody, right? Because basically it doesn't matter what the subject is to us. Now, while
Right.
most of our audience is in the real estate space, our product is agnostic to anybody, right? So it's really about if someone is looking to, if a lot of times we'll get into these phases where we're working hard and we're giving it all we've got and we're willing to do more work, but we're just not getting the results. I've been in phases like that for years where you're putting in the effort the time it's not working and you're willing to put it in, but it's not working. So if you're in a position like that, the missing piece is not hard work. The missing piece is alignment. So if you I think everybody should take a foray into a couple years in mindset coaching, because when you learn how to change your mindset, you learn how to change your reality. Because your brain is basically a computer that's been cataloging everything that's gone into it, however long you've been alive. And that creates your mindset, right? And your mindset isn't designed to make you wealthy and successful. It's designed to make you not dead. So we end up having our survival mechanism firing off and causing us fear and anxiety when our lives aren't in danger. But when you start to uncover, and go bigger towards bigger and bigger things, oh my God, I'm going to go hit this big target I never did before. And then all of a sudden, a second later, you're like, oh my God, I failed 4 years ago, right? So it's like, as you're going bigger and bigger, any of the past references in your mindset that contradict it will come up. And they're coming up for integration and growth through new lessons. But most people don't know how to change their mindset. So they just kind of end up playing, instead of 100% of their potential, they're down to 80% because that's as much as they can play without getting too uncomfortable. Because if they get too uncomfortable, they're not able to take action. And what I've discovered are the fastest tools on the planet to change mindset, like literally change belief in minutes. And with that, it's super easy. So that's why I think everybody should learn a little bit about mindset, because it's so powerful.
How important is it to remove yourself from a location that you're in? Like and I don't mean like move away.
Yeah.
I just mean how important, when you need to change your mindset, how valuable is it to separate from the day-to-day, the everyday spot? Or is it as important to you in your coaching?
Now, if you're in a physical situation that is triggering you in a negative way, getting out of that will make it easier to shift your mindset. But it doesn't matter. The principles are the same. The biggest challenge is if you're in an environment where you're being triggered more, there's usually a greater emotional reaction that has to be managed. And where most people get stuck is they get stuck in the emotional reaction instead of processing through the emotional reaction and getting back into alignment. Most because they don't know how to do that. So people end up getting stuck in that, and they start aiming smaller and smaller to avoid it.
Stuck in the emotional,
in
the emotional cycle.
Yeah, like something happens, you have a reaction to it, and you're like, and that reaction is throwing you off, and not being able to get out of that reaction.
Yeah. I can relate to that. I mean, I do pretty good at knowing when I'm in a good spot, but I think when we're going through this empty nest phase where our oldest we just dropped off to college, and then our youngest is at an academy, so he's literally living away, and my wife and I are both like in this moment where like we go in through these I feel like we have these moments where we're like, oh man, this is not what we really wanted it to be, and then we kind of come out of it and we're like, all right, well, what are we going to do next, and how are we going to but it's a change, it's a transformative moment. And when you have some of these transformative moments and everything is planned out, especially for entrepreneurs, like we plan and visualize all these results of the things we're aiming towards. Business is super easy, but sometimes life has those moments that derail you for a moment. And you got to just be like, okay, what's the plan? How are we moving forward? Are we living in alignment? Or are we focused too much in the emotional aspect of just feeling that different feeling in the home, the less busy?
Yeah. I'm sorry, what was that question? I missed that. I spaced out there for a second. A little bit of break.
No, you're fine. There's no space out. I was more making a point about you. Don't even worry about the question.
That makes sense. Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. Yeah. It's awesome. Man.
The question isn't even important. The key is, I was just agreeing that I can find how easy it is to fall into the emotional trap. That's all. And I think that when people are falling into an emotional trap, I think more people than not get lost there and stay for so long. And That's what you were describing.
Yeah, and we all have patterns too, and we have different phases of life where one thing's a problem and it isn't. And it's usual. And what's coming up, what I'm seeing with a lot of people right now, especially what's impacting relationship, is their childhood attachment styles, their childhood wounds and things like that coming up, right? So it's almost like everybody right now is doing a deep integration work and cleanup is what I'm seeing. Because you remember, like, 20 years ago in the 90s, you could stuff that personal growth in a closet and forget about it for 4 years, right? Now you can't. It's automatic, it's nonstop, and it's accelerating, right? The growth is accelerating too. Aren't you noticing that?
Well, yeah, well, I totally noticed. I agree completely. And it's funny because the attachment styles are, I just had a 2-3 hour conversation at a party a couple weeks ago with a couple of friends, and we were all sitting around in couples, and we were talking about attachment styles and how we grew up and where our challenges are. And I feel like we're much more apt to discuss things that we didn't discuss, 20 years ago. I mean, we were really taught to just bottle that stuff up and never talk about it. And it's especially as men, it's a weakness. But acknowledging it and understanding where it's coming from helps you actually move through it.
Yeah, because it's usually in the situation, there's usually unprocessed trapped emotion from the past. That's usually what it is. But when you lean into it, that's how you kind of get through it. But most people don't know how to get out of it, right? But the thing is, we're operating at such a high frequency now that you can process anything with just stillness, right? And if you're struggling to get to stillness, you can do box breathing. Do you know what box breathing is? Box breathing is a 4 count. Breathe in, hold your breath. Breathe out, hold your breath for like 4, 4, 4, 4. That's a really good way. And I find is that when I'm coaching somebody, if they're out of alignment and reaction, if I just get them still for a minute or two, they come back into alignment, because alignment is actually our default state. We get out of alignment, we start doing things and going bigger and bigger. And I have this really unique perspective because I've been in personal growth industry professionally for full time for over 11 years. And what I'm seeing now is that the average frequency from the average person is way higher than it was before. Like in 2014, when I started coaching these tools, there were times where I'd get a client and I'd have to coach them for 6 months before they could run that tool. Now I can get anybody to that tool in 5 minutes. Now I've gotten better, but at the same time, everybody's at a higher frequency, and that's why it's becoming more common, right? I'm really curious with this growth accelerating where we're going, right?
Why do you think it's the case? Why do you think the frequency is so much higher right now?
It's just like evolution, I think there's some theories about, our solar system. I don't know if they're true or not, but there's theories that our solar system circles the Milky Way galaxy every 26,000 years. And there's an equinox when it passes, right? And there's a theory that one direction consciousness goes down, the other direction consciousness goes up. And we pass the consciousness going back up equinox at the end of the Mayan calendar in November 21st, 2012. So there's a lot of interesting theories about why frequency is going up. But at the same time, it seems like we're going through an integration of mind and heart individually and collectively, right?
How much do you think social media and the attention to information, like I feel like we're learning at a higher capacity as well, where I find myself never stopping sometimes, where even when I'm taking a break, I'm reading an article about something, or we used to actually break, but now we learn.
Yeah.
And, and if you're like us, you probably have this hunger to learn and to listen, and there's one more podcast or one more. And how much do you think that's playing into the higher frequency?
It is, right? I think it's all part of it. It's all connected, right? We're at this stage of civilization where everything's shifting, and clearly, and it's kind of interesting because everything seemed dialed in, and all of a sudden there was corruption everywhere. I'm like, where'd this come from? Like, out of nowhere, right? So we've got like our major institutions, government, education, healthcare, finance, all have been set up to serve the few of us. They're all changing, right? It's all changing because we're coming together in that old model. So whether it's the age of Aquarius, I don't know the specific reason why, but it's different now, right? Yeah.
I always wonder if it's just that, if you had friends that grew up in a super sheltered environment, and then they walk out one day and they're like, wait a second, I had no idea this even existed.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like we were all living in this highly sheltered world where we thought everything the news told us was real.
Yeah.
And everything, I mean, I still hear people say, remember when the news just reported the news? And I find myself going, is that bullshit or is that even real? Did it ever just report the news, or do we just never know how to be curious enough to ask questions as to whether or not it's real or not? And I think today we're all asking questions because curiosity is peaked.
Yeah.
The frequency is higher, but curiosity hopefully gets higher, and that would allow us to challenge the normal beliefs. But I think back to that like sheltered friend that comes out and they're like, whoa, wait a second. My best analogy is I went to my girlfriends who became my wife, and I'll never forget, they all got their own steaks. When they cook steaks on the grill, it's one of the things that resonates with me the most, because we had like a piece of London broil and we would cut it and it was chewy and it kind of sucked. And I go to Adrian's house and her dad's like, pick your steak. And I'm like, what do you mean pick your steak? This is a world. This is a real thing. People pick their steaks. I get a whole steak. I don't have to like see if there's any left before I go. And it was like, I was sheltered enough, and not in a negative way. I was not, my mom listens to this podcast. Mom, I was not hungry ever, but it was like mind boggling to me that existed.
Yeah. Interesting.
I mean, it's interesting dynamic. I mean, I think the world is moving at a different frequency. I don't know the answer, man, but it's definitely kind of a cool vibe. But it's kind of fun to teach in it, right? It's kind of fun to help people accomplish the impossible, because maybe the impossible is even more than you even thought was possible when you started coaching them.
True. Yeah. It is. It's a great time. I'm grateful to be in the personal growth industry. I love coaching. It's awesome, and it's fun. Yeah.
How do you see the space expanding? How do you see this space? Like, do you see more people willing to utilize it? Do you see less people but more results? Like, what is the thought process here?
Well, I'm seeing more and more people being open to coaching than before. The industry itself is just saturated because everybody's a coach now, right? Everybody and their brother's a coach. So standing out in this industry is getting more difficult. But I think at the end of the day, the higher level tools will continue to stand out, because most of the industry is still using all of the old neuro-linguistic programming content, Tony Robbins stuff from the 80s, right? And all of those results-based coaching tools that are focusing on, remember, that the mindset and action level are just the old way. So as more and more people migrate to the frame level, then that methodology is going to, I really hope it comes commonplace, because it works so much better.
Yeah, it's interesting in the financial services industry. I remember when I came in 22, 23 years ago, and everything in our industry was based around transaction. Like everybody, it was all sales related. Everything was transaction related. And I remember really quickly, because it was coming out of the 99 to 2001, September 11th happens. And I remember going, if I don't create a relationship with the person we're serving, I'm never going to have any significance at all to help people and to do what we really want. And so there was this like shift from transaction to relationship, which really elevated the industry, allowed for it to be better than it was all those years prior. And I think most industries go through that kind of transaction to relationship timeline.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So Jason, how do people get a hold of you, man? If they want to be a part of what you're doing, if they're looking to take their dreams to an impossible level in their brain, but not an impossible level in reality, how do they get in touch with you? What do they do?
Yeah, I do a free call every Monday at 10 a.m. Central called the Monday Mindset Reset. So if you want to join that call, you can go to mondaymindsetreset.com. You can also find me on Instagram under Jason Drees Coaching. You can also find me if you're interested in learning more about coaching and want to have a call with me. If you go to freeintrosession.com, that'll book you up with a complimentary 20 to 30 minute mini coaching session, and you can get an experience of it yourself.
Awesome. Yeah. And they can buy your book. Everywhere that books are sold.
Books are sold. It's on Audible too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah. And anything else that you wanted to share with the audience before we wrap up today?
No, I just say, like, The time now is to lean into the discomfort that's coming up, and really stop settling and go after everything you want, because you are far more capable than you think you are.
I agree, and I love having people on like Jason, because all they're doing is helping the world think a little bigger and know that those dreams and goals are achievable. And especially if you're helping the next generation really think a little bit bigger and not so small like maybe we did growing up. So, Jason, very grateful for your time. Awesome to have you. And I look forward to hopefully some people reaching out and learning about you and what you have to offer the world.
Well, thanks for the invite, Scott. It was great. I enjoyed this conversation.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.